Good morning, Jan. How are you?
I was trying to say good morning and I could not get my mute button to work.
We I was doing the same thing. I like tried to turn my sound on and instead I got the video. It was all very confusing.
Well, is it just you and me today?
So Jessica is working on getting the Zoom set up and Aaron is having a little bit of tech troubles this morning as well. So right
Oh,
now it's just you and me, but
oh,
I think there's at least one person that's in the office. I was texting Jessica about it. So hopefully she'll get that going here
well, that
shortly.
is so funny because usually I wait for Jessica's emails and stuff. And I said, no, I've been learning commands. So I went into the intranet, saw the calendar, clicked on the link. I'm like, oh my gosh. And you know me, I am technology illiterate.
You are so good this morning, Jan. You're turning over a new leaf.
I know. I said after midway through January, I said, okay, hold on. You're not getting off to the right start. Concentrate, concentrate. So I've really tried to really step outside that box and get into how, I sat down with Lucy a couple of times. Of course, we still need to do some work. Our last 2 weeks, it's been kind of crazy, but yeah, just learn all this instead of going, oh, I got to wait on somebody. If they don't send it, I'm just not going to do it.
I know I should probably start sending out the link as well. But sometimes when I copy a link from the like weekly news thing,
Uh-huh.
it doesn't work. Like I can't copy it for some reason.
And I haven't even tried that. So
I'm not real tech savvy either. So there's that.
that's why I'm glad. This is one thing I love about KW in our office. If you're not savvy, there's somebody that is there for you.
So true.
So I didn't know you were going to Hawaii. How was it?
It was amazing. Oh my gosh. I loved it. I wish I was still there.
I bet you do. Trying to get in a little vacation before the big baby comes.
I know. I know. Call it a baby moon now is the hot term.
I'm telling you, it won't be long.
I know. It's pretty crazy. May is just around the corner.
I know, blinking it. Well, look at February. We're almost through February. So
I know. I know.
Can you hear me?
I hear somebody.
Ashley, Ashley, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now. Sorry, my Zoom cut off for some reason, but I'm here. Good
Hey,
morning.
good morning. How are you?
I'm fantastic.
Welcome home.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Dallas is here with me. She's at one of our brand new agents.
What was your name? I'm sorry, I missed it.
Her name is O'Dallas.
Oh, Dallas. Nice to meet you. I'm Ashley with O'Kelly right across the hall. So hopefully I'll be seeing lots of you.
Hopefully. So, Jan, it's a new agent. You need to behave, young lady.
Darn. Yeah, I don't want to scare anybody.
I'm teasing you, Jan. All right, sorry for all the technical difficulty, but I think we're good to go now. So
Perfect.
by the
And
way,
Aaron with Onward. I don't know if you've had a chance to meet her yet, O'Dallas or not, but she's getting on Zoom. She had a little bit of a technical difficulty this morning as well. So I'll hold down the fort while she's working that out.
okay.
Okay. Do either of y'all have any questions this morning?
I was just coming to see exactly what this was about.
Sure, sure. And normally it's in person and on Zoom, but I just got back from vacation in a very different time zone, so I'm not in the office today. But are you newly licensed?
Yeah.
Well, congratulations. That's so exciting. How fun. So normally what we do is this is a time, and for both me and Aaron, again, I'm closing attorney, and then Aaron is the lender. Our door is always open, so you can always come ask us questions, call us, email us, walk on in, visit us, text us, whatever is easiest for you. But we set these times aside so that people can ask questions and we can go over certain things that we're seeing come up recently. And sometimes it's helpful for people to hear what other people are going through so that they can, learn from those questions. Maybe it was something that you didn't think about, something that you don't necessarily have going on right this second, but would still be helpful to learn. So don't think of it as the only time to ask questions. It's just kind of questions in a group setting. So
Yeah.
with that being said, do you have anything pressing this morning that you want to ask about, Jan?
Oh, you know me, everything's pressing with me.
Or even if it's not pressing, do you have any interesting questions that you need help with?
No, that I'm trying to think. Did something go on over the weekend? I can't. You know me, it will take me a minute to remember. It's swimming around up there. I don't think the only thing you and I talked about before you went on vacation is sitting down just a minute to highlight the changes that I missed.
Yeah,
the
yeah,
contract.
absolutely. And I'll be back in the office tomorrow too, so we can set up a time to do that.
Yeah.
Oh, Dallas, just so you know, the contracts, and I'm not sure if you've met with like Enrique or anybody to go over the contracts and kind of how that works, but in Georgia we have form contracts. And so it makes it really easy because you want to read them, you want to understand them, but I'm there to answer any questions if you need help putting a stipulation together. Oh, we've got Aaron here. Yay. Putting a stipulation together, I can help with that. But what Jan's talking about is twice a year, the forms committee updates the forms. So they make changes, they address different issues, all that kind of stuff. And so the new year changes, of course, came out in January. So we're talking about sitting down and going through all of those together.
Okay.
Yeah, and then they'll change them again, like more minor changes in the summer. Typically, it's like May or June is their kind of mid-year change, if you will. And Aaron, did you want to take a second to introduce yourself? We've got a new agent in person in the office. Her name's O'Dallas. And I kind of gave her a little bit of a minute on who you are, but if you wanted to say hi. And of course, you know Jan.
Absolutely. Hi, O'Dallas. I'm Erin D. Armis with Onward Home Mortgage. Sorry, I'm on my phone because I never do this in Zoom because we're usually there, but we're closed today. So we're both doing this from Zoom, but I could not get on my computer. My computer is blocking the Zoom link. So, and of course, my IT department is closed today. So I'm on the phone, but welcome. Super glad you're here. Hope to meet you in person soon. Thanks for coming. Usually Ashley and I are there in person, so.
Yeah. Thank you.
Did you have anything crazy and interesting that's gone on over the last couple weeks that you want to talk about, Aaron?
Let's see here.
You want to take a
Nothing
second?
super crazy. Yeah. I mean, I will touch on, now that it's February, halfway through February, like when we're talking about self-employed buyers, the people that are working on their taxes, we've had some people come in and they're not done with their taxes or they haven't started their 23. So we can still use 21 and 22 tax returns to calculate income and just use a P&L from 2023 if they have not filed yet and they're looking to buy. That is okay up until April 15th or the tax deadline. Once that deadline passes, we either need to use the 23 so we can recalculate once they file using 22 and 23. Or if they aren't filing, then like say they have a business return, a lot of S Corps don't file by April, they do an extension, then we can continue using 21 and 22, but we do have to have an extension filed and a copy of that. So we're kind of having conversations. I've had a couple in the last week or so where they are working on their 23 taxes because that income is more than 22. So remember, we're always averaging the last 2 years. So if 23 is higher than 22, we want them to go ahead and file so we can use 22 and 23 if that gives them more income than 21 and 22 did. So what we can always do is tell them, go ahead and have your taxes worked up. If they're already working on it, have your CPA do it. When they send you the draft to look at and sign, go ahead and forward it to me, because I can look at it, calculate the income even before it's filed, and make sure, one, we have enough income. If not, if there's a lot of write-offs, we can kind of talk through that and say, hey, are these legit? You know, not legit, but sometimes you can do less write-off, fewer write-offs, and boost the income a little bit. So we're happy to kind of look through that before clients file and just make sure that they're showing the income that they're going to need before they file those tax returns with the IRS if they're looking to get pre-approved. So self-employed people, that's one thing. I've had that conversation a couple times in the last couple weeks.
One thing that I've seen come up quite a few times over the last little bit, I think we're seeing people closing in escrow more often than we were before. And a big question is, what do we do with the keys? So that is something that I wanted to talk about for a second. So what closing in escrow is either one side, both sides, someone has come in and signed, but the closing is not all the way done because we're pending something, whether it's, you know, maybe the buyer signed early or the seller signed early and we need the other party to sign. Maybe everybody has signed and we're waiting on the buyer's wire to hit our account. Maybe everything has happened, but the lender won't give us the funding authorization or we're missing their wire. Neither one of those are ever problems when we're working with Onward, but we're not always so lucky. So other lenders, we might have that issue. And so that's fine. But what happens is we say, instead of y'all sitting in this room for the next 45 minutes, 2 hours, 4 hours, however long it's going to take to make this happen, y'all can go ahead and acknowledge, hey, we're missing a piece of the puzzle and my closing is not done until that puzzle is clicked into place. So when that happens, the seller still owns the property. Know that the buyer doesn't own the property until the closing is complete. And one of the changes to the GAR form contracts that came out in January was actually defining what a closing is. So we all know generally what closing is, but it's helpful that they've now defined it, which seems kind of silly, but what's nice about it is that it does say more or less when the attorney tells you your closing is done, that's when you're closed, because that alleviates a lot of the confusion. Now they put it a lot more clear. They don't necessarily use those words, but that's more or less what it boils down to. So I have people who think, okay, I've signed everything. The seller signed everything. I've sent my money. It's not my problem that my lender hasn't sent the money yet. I feel like I should own the house. That's not true. So it clarifies that the attorney has to have all of the pieces, and then they say your closing is done. So until you have that official congratulations, your closing is done from the attorney and you're in escrow, the seller still owns the home. So as a listing agent, you don't want to give those keys to the buyer until the closing is complete. Because what if that lender is super sketchy and they literally never send me the money? Now you've given the buyer the keys. The buyer is never going to own the home because they don't actually have a loan that sent us money. And you have to go through getting those keys back so you can continue owning that home. Now, is that likely? No. But is it possible? Yes. So you don't want to give those keys. You don't want the buyer to start working. What if it's the buyer's money that you're missing? You definitely don't want to give them the keys because the likelihood of them not sending the money is far greater than a lender not sending the money. So just know from the listing side, you want to hang on to those keys until the closing is completely done and you're no longer in escrow. From the buyer side, it's good to prep your clients and say, you know, the attorney should explain to you, and certainly if you're closing with me, I will explain what closing in escrow is, but any closing attorney should explain that to you. But basically, you want to prep your buyer. If you hear close in escrow, they want assurance from you because you're the trusted person that they've been working with through the whole process. And the attorney, they've sent documents to us. We've communicated some, but nowhere near the level that you've been working with them, like finding the house, and not even as much as the lender through the approval process. So they're going to look to you as the trusted source. So for you to tell them, yes, this is fine. This happens sometimes. As soon as that lender's money gets there, we'll be able to collect the keys and sort of mimic what the attorney is telling you. We've got that united front, and then your buyer is comfortable. if you tell your buyer, no, as soon as you sign, you get the keys no matter what, and then I come in and say, you don't own it, and y'all start asking about keys, then it's a little bit awkward that I'm saying something a little bit different than you guys are. Keep in mind, I don't necessarily have to touch the keys. That's not part of the closing process, is for me to physically get the keys and hand them over. That's done agent to agent and party to party. So if you have a seller who wants to give them the keys, I'm not going to stand in your way of doing that. But if someone turns and looks at me and says, should I give them the keys? Then I'll have to tell them that technically seller still owns the property. So it's really up to you guys. This is what I see done most of the time. And I try to be a neutral party there, but it's really helpful for y'all to understand that really your contract, unless you have some sort of temporary occupancy set up, your contract says that the seller is obligated to give the keys upon closing, not upon signing the paperwork. So the seller, per the contract, doesn't have to give them until the property is fully closed. And so I see that being confusing for people a lot, especially with different programs that exist out there, different programs that have kind of like middlemen involved, if you will, that sign in other states. Maybe like Open Door would be an example. Choctaw would be another example. There's another one coming out. I forget the name of it, but it's another kind of tribe-based loan. But some of those sign the format for a closing is different. And so if there's any confusion about, when the property is going to be owned, always feel free to give me a shout. But when we're sitting there signing, I'll go over like when keys, when the closing is fully done, when wires will go out, that sort of thing. But since I've been getting a lot of questions about that, I thought it would be good to touch on. If you've got a mail out situation where maybe your seller is in another state and they're signing the documents there and sending them back to us, if they want to include in that overnight packet that they'll send us the keys for me to hand the keys to the buyer, totally fine with doing that. They don't have to. And if that's not addressed, it's not something I'm going to ask for necessarily. Again, it's up to the agents to coordinate on that. But if they want to send it, I'm happy to hold on to them and pass them along with parties' approval. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
The other thing to keep in mind about closing in escrow, and just in general, as the closing attorney, we represent the lender. So I don't represent the buyer or the seller. The lender is my client, more or less. And so whenever we're doing something that's outside of the norm, including closing an escrow into a new day, I have to have the lender's approval to be able to do that. And so if you have a buyer, like let's say we're closing tomorrow, so our closing is Tuesday, and they're like, I'm not going to be able to get the money over there until Thursday. Don't tell them, no problem. You can close an escrow pending receipt of the money, because the lender's probably not going to allow for that. We don't have to get the lender to approve closing an escrow for a few hours. If we're funding it the same day, meaning completing the closing the same day, then that's fine. But if we have to carry it on to the next day, we do need lender approval for that. So it's smart to coach your buyers to make sure to show up on time for closing. It's smart to coach your buyers to send any wire the day before closing rather than the morning of, because wires, they have to they start their originating bank, closing, and your client sends it at 9, we might get it in time. We might not. It really just depends. So having them send it the day before. Sorry, I don't know what happened there. Having them send it the day before is going to be better to avoid any sort of delay on the buyer side. But just again, know that pretty much anything that's not your normal, everyone comes at the same time, signs at the same time, and we fund it the same day, it's gonna require lender approval.
Okay. Good to know.
Is there anything else from the lender side for closing and escrow? Aaron?
Agree with everything you just said. And yes, lender approval is always needed, even just to close an escrow. One thing they're going to want to know is how long it's anticipated, because when we send wires, typically if it's going to be out for more than 24 hours, they're going to call it back and wait and resend it. So that's something to fund tomorrow, we'll still be okay with that. Generally speaking, we'll go ahead and close it in escrow. And if the money can sit there overnight, if it's something where it's like, hey, it might be, 3 days. If we've already sent that wire, which we would have if we're closing today, we're going to go ahead and pull it back, and then we're going to wait and resend it. So that's just kind of something money wise with the lender that we have to do. One big thing that I think is COs, so certificates of occupancy. Like, even if it's not a builder home, even if it's a big renovation, say they've torn it down to the studs and redone it, they're getting a new CO for that property. That is something that has to be in hand before it can be funded. So we've got one that's kind of dragging on now. This happens a lot where they're like, hey, the agents think we're getting the CO by, Friday, and we're planning to close next, Monday. So we can go ahead and make the CO PTF, which stands for prior to funding. So everything else can be cleared. We can send the loan through audit. We can send the wire to Ashley's firm, but everything is based on that CO is going to be in, and we're going to see it. We're going to have a copy of it before the funding is done. So basically before the money is dispersed, before Ashley can say the words, okay, your closing is completed. That CO has to be there. If it doesn't come in, which this has happened many times, then we pull the money back. We have to set a new date. Everyone has to wait and go away. So COs are something that it's really not a great idea to say, okay, it's supposed to be in here on that day, that morning, let's just close that afternoon and everyone's there. It's really better to wait till it's actually in. It's happened so many times where we've gone to closing, sent wires for closing, and the CO actually doesn't show up, that our wiring department really doesn't want to even send a wire now until the CO is physically received. So just know that as we see more and more new constructions, just understand that the CO is a very, very big part of closing. And if you're representing the buyer, you don't want to close without a CO. I've had people ask that too, or the seller is like, hey, here's everything. All the inspections were passed. We just don't have the certificate yet. And this happened more, 21, 22 after COVID, when counties were really, really behind in cities. But still, you're putting your buyer at risk, even if the lender would allow you to close without the CO. That's literally the certificate of occupancy that says they can live there. So if you don't have that, technically, they're not supposed to be moving into the property. So why would they want to close on it if they can't move into it?
Yeah, it says they can live there because it's safe to live there, not just like a standard city gave them a thumbs up to make money. It's like, we've inspected it and it's safe for you to live there.
Yeah. So that's the one thing I see a lot lately that can delay your closing. So keep in touch with your lender on that. And if there isn't a CO, I mean, really just my advice is to wait till that's physically received, have everything else done on the loan. Everything else can be cleared and done. And then once that CO comes, then let's set the date, even if it's the next day, that's fine. But it's just it's less stress than having everybody keep going to the attorney's office and then the CO not showing up. Other than that, I mean, for escrow, Ashley, I think you really nailed it all. Sometimes stuff happens, or buyer's money's not there, or something's not, fixed, or whatever, the seller's not out. I mean, I've heard many different things, but as long as it's, a 24-hour, if it's expected to resolve itself within 24 hours, then generally as a lender, we're fine with that, is knowing that everything's going to disperse and be done the next day.
Yeah, and I find that that's true for most lenders. Now, every lender is going to have a different policy, so I think that's important to point out as well, because you might have a client that's cousin works for Wells Fargo and they're just dead set on using them instead of going with Onward or something. But I would say most lenders are comfortable with us funding the next day. Anything past that, I think it's super, super rare to get the approval on that. But I will say some lenders say, nope, we do not close an escrow, period, end of story. Everyone has to come back and sign again tomorrow. Because that's what, if a lender doesn't give approval, that's what ends up happening is everybody has to come back and re-close. So for seller documents, typically they don't need to come back depending on whether the lender has anything specific for them to sign, because most seller documents are attorney generated. So a deed dated the day before closing is still totally usable. They're going to have to approve numbers because the prorations are going to be different based off the closing day. Because what the contract says is that the taxes and HOA and that kind of thing are all prorated as of the day of closing. So if you've got, an HOA that's $365 a year and your closing moves from January 3rd to January 4th, now we're prorating for 4 days instead of 3, right? So we'll have to reapprove numbers, but the buyer will have to come back into the office and sign an entirely new package. So we obviously don't want that, and we want to avoid that. But that's kind of what happens if the answer that they give us is a no. So good to, that's why we have to ask the lender every time, is because there's not a general all lenders do this kind of thing. We have to get it for every loan, and different loans, even with the same lender, might have different answers, different reasons to close an escrow might produce different answers. So that's why we have to ask them every time. And while we're talking about escrow, I will say that there's a difference between holding money in escrow and closing in escrow. So the word escrow is used quite a lot in our industry and our business and what we do, and it gets kind of confusing, and I don't know why we don't have different words, but essentially escrow means like to hold separately, right? So that's why we use it in so many different ways. But to close an escrow means the entire process is put on hold until XYZ is received. To hold money in escrow means we can go ahead and close. We can fund everything but that little pot of money that we've held in escrow. So maybe the seller, after they pay off their mortgage, liens, prorations, your commission, all that good stuff, maybe they're walking away with $100,000. But for whatever reason, we're holding $10,000 in escrow. That means I would send them 90, and then the 10,000 that's being argued over for whatever reason would get dispersed later on. So just know that holding money in escrow is not the same thing as closing in escrow. They're very different. Lender approval on closing in escrow for like the 24 hours is much easier to obtain than holding money in escrow. So I would say try not to jump straight to holding money in escrow, because again, we represent the lender. They've got to approve it. They're going to want to know why. And if it's a repair with the house, then they might have an issue with that. So what I would say, because sometimes what'll happen is you show up for your final walkthrough, everything looks great, but then the lamp they were supposed to leave isn't there. Or maybe they were supposed to get the carpets cleaned and they haven't done that. They're not all the way moved out. Whatever it is, maybe they were supposed to replace a window and that window's not replaced yet. Something. And you say, well, what do we do? Everyone's first reaction is, let's just have the attorney hold money in escrow. That's not going to be your best option, again, because a lot of lenders will not approve that, because they'll see, let's say it's getting the carpets cleaned. They'll see that your contract said seller will get the carpet cleaned. Then we're saying we have to hold money in escrow because the carpets aren't cleaned. They're going to say, well, we need the contract to be met. We need to get those carpets cleaned. They might say, no problem, whatever. It really kind of depends on what the actual issue is, I've found. But a lot of times you don't necessarily want to alert the lender to a problem. Now, certainly we're not trying to commit any sort of mortgage fraud and telling the lender something's done when it's not, but there are certain things that you don't necessarily want to draw their attention to and bring up if it's going to be resolved. And so I had one a few weeks ago where I think the HVAC was supposed to get fixed, and the seller actually paid someone to come out and fix it. When the buyer, and they did come out, when the buyer came to do their walkthrough, the HVAC wasn't working again. So it's not like the seller even did anything wrong. It was the HVAC company failed. Well, the loan officer, and again, this is not Onward, the loan officer took it upon himself to actually call his underwriter, who then required it be fixed before we could close. So everyone had to come back and reclose. What a better option would have been, instead of us holding money in escrow, because that's what generated that conversation, was, hey, what is the HVAC guy going to charge? Like, get your own HVAC guy. What is he going to charge to come out and to fix this issue? And let's just go ahead and take that money from the seller proceeds and pay that guy directly. And so what that looks like in an amendment is seller to pay HVACs R Us $2,000 at closing, closing attorney to give check to buyer at closing. That way, we're pulling that money out and the seller is paying for it to get corrected, but we don't have to go to the lender and say, hey, we need to hold money in escrow because there's an HVAC issue. And they don't have to go through and approve that. They'll see it on the seller side. And if it's a large amount, we do need to point out, hey, seller's paying for this. But a lender is a lot less concerned with what a seller is paying for than money that could go to a buyer, or specifically some sort of update or repair to the house that is in the contract. So what I would advise you to do is, if you go to a walkthrough, there is an issue, then just call me and say, what's the easiest path to fixing this? Talk to your lender. What's the easiest path to fixing this? And we'll guide you through how to do that most efficiently.
Yeah, and to add to that, Ashley, if there's something that's in the contract, like already specified, like say from your ATAC, amendment to address concerns from your inspection, that's when you noted there was an issue with the HVAC. So it was already in the contract that there were repairs to be completed. When there's something like that in the contract, we as the lender, because it's in the contract, we have to make sure that everything that the contract says is being done has been done before we can close. So we're usually either asking for receipts or some kind of confirmation that that HVAC was repaired. So in the event that you're seeing at the walkthrough that it wasn't, usually as a lender, we've already made you find that out. But say it wasn't part of that. Say it was never in the contract and you go to the final walkthrough and that's when something you notice is up with the HVAC. At that point, totally agree with Ashley. Call the lender, call her, say, hey, how do we go about this? Agree with having the seller pay for it at closing, and having it taken, words. If you're as is, meaning everything was working then, everything was fine, the value is based on the current condition, there's no repairs needed to reach the value that the home has been appraised for, then we as a lender, we're pretty lenient about if they want to pay for something after. Whether it's, hey, we're paying for an HVAC tune-up, okay, or we're paying for this, or we're paying for that. As long as we've got an appraisal that says the property was as is, then we're usually fine with that, even if we ask what it's for. Things like carpet cleaning, again, just call, because there are certain percent fine and a lender going to approve that they can handle after closing. If the roof is leaking, that's something that we want fixed before closing. Anything that affects the house or the value of the home, or that the house is not in, a condition that is expected, that's going to be something that as a lender, they're going to say, you can't wait till after closing to repair a roof that's leaking in the house. You need to repair that first. So just, again, the easiest route is to call and ask. Ask me, ask Ashley, we can guide you.
And I'll say too, that what the contract obligates the seller to fix, like let's say you have the HVAC is not working there because it was working when you put in the offer. So there was no need for an amendment or an ATAC or anything to say, let's fix the HVAC. And then they show up for the walkthrough and it's not working. That the reason that the seller is obligated to fix that is that your contract says that the seller will sell you the home in virtually the same condition as when you put the offer in. So if you put the offer in and the HVAC is not working and you don't do any sort of amendment, and then you go to the walkthrough, it's still not working, the seller has no obligation to fix it because you put in an offer with it not working. You didn't do any kind of amendment. You went through, you did all of your inspections and all of that. You knew it wasn't working. You didn't ask for it. Seller doesn't have to fix that. But if it was working when you put in the offer and then it stops working before closing, that's when the seller's going to have to fix it. And what Aaron's talking about, where it's not already an amendment in the contract, so they don't know to look for that. They don't know to ask for receipts, but the seller is still obligated. And I think it's important to point out that sometimes what a contract obligates a seller to do and what a lender requires to loan money on a home for are not always going to be the same thing. So sometimes there is a little bit of a divide there, because what a lender's looking at is there sufficient collateral so that if they don't pay the mortgage, we can foreclose and we can sell the house and we can still make money off of it, right? That's kind of bottom line. That's why lenders are happy to lend money on homes, is because they get that collateral. But if that collateral is not worth what it's supposed to be worth, then that's a problem, right? So that's what lenders are kind of looking at. So there could be a slight difference depending on what your buyer requires. So maybe the appraisal comes back requiring a seller make an update. Depending on how your contract is written, the seller might not actually be legally obligated to make that repair. So then the question comes down to, okay, Mr. Seller, are you going to have to make this repair regardless of what buyer you have? So you should go on and do it. Or could the buyer possibly either lose earnest money, or if they're still within different contingency periods, terminate the contract and get that back because the seller's not willing to. But I think it's important to point out that a lender requirement is not always going to be the exact same thing as an obligation that a seller has in a contract. So just kind of be mindful of that too, because I see that question come up a lot. Because a lot of people say, oh, well, the lender required it, seller has to do it. Sometimes yes, but sometimes no. And it just depends on how your contract was written and what sort of contingencies and exhibits and stuff that you've added to it.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, think of like the FHA addendum and stuff that talks about how much the seller will pay for any repairs required on an appraisal. So that's a common one. You know, usually I see around $500 or something, where it's really put into the contract saying, hey, if the appraisal comes back and there's something that needs to be repaired, the seller's already, if it says $500, the seller has already agreed per their contract to make any repairs required by the appraiser up to that amount. Now, if they come back and say, hey, you need to repair this and it's $1,000, they're not required to, but it's negotiable. They can negotiate that and decide what they want to do. But if a lender is requiring something to be repaired, what that means from an appraisal, it means that it has to be repaired in order to close the deal. But like Ashley's saying, it doesn't necessarily mean the seller has to do it unless that was already part of the contract up to a certain amount and it falls under that. So basically they'd be renegotiating that, like, hey, will you do this? You know, yes, no, which is why you want to make sure your appraisals are coming back within their contingency if it's not an FHA or a VA. Period, or during your due diligence, however you've structured it, so that you have time if something comes back and you're a little surprised to deal with it.
Do you have questions on any of that, Odalys? I know that it's kind of a lot, especially if you're newly licensed, to be like, what are they talking about? So if you have questions, don't think that they're silly questions. Just pipe up and ask them, because I promise you they're not silly.
No, I kind of get all the, like, in escrow, I got that, and then I got the one with the loan. If you guys need anything fixed, like, try to get it done before.
Yeah. Are you joining PC coaching?
I think I am, yes. I haven't
Good.
spoken to Enrique yet.
He's amazing. You will love him. And on Tuesday, and Jan's part of PC coaching, so she can speak to that as well and how helpful that's been for her. But on Tuesdays, I teach a contracts class with Enrique to the PC coaching group. And I think Erin teaches like right after team meeting, and then we all go to lunch, and then I teach right after lunch. Is that right, Erin? Do you teach right after team meeting? Or
Yeah,
pop
I
in?
just come in for about the last 15 minutes of that first hour and give you a little bit of info from the financing world and there for questions. And then then we go to lunch, and then you can talk contracts with Ashley after. So you'll see us weekly if you do PC.
Oh, okay, so it's like
But
every
yeah.
Tuesday?
Yeah, I don't know how often it meets. Dan, do you? Well, I know you know, but
You talking about PC?
yeah.
Yeah, it's every Tuesday.
Okay, so it's just on Tuesdays. Yes, every
Yeah.
Tuesday.
But he does have a calendar of things that go on during the week. A lot of them are on Zoom. Like this afternoon from 2 to 3 is skills sessions, which I love. It's probably my favorite. So that's
Awesome.
2 to 3.
You mean your second favorite after the
Well,
contracts
yes,
class? Come
let me
on.
back that up after seeing y'all on Tuesday.
Well, we know Tuesday's your real favorite, so I knew what you meant.
Well, yes, because you're in person. Oh. But yes, PC is good. It's a good group of people.
And what I think is just kind of from an outside perspective, what I think the most helpful thing about PC coaching is the access to Enrique. And I think the most valuable thing there is if you write a contract, then you can send it to him before you get anyone to sign it, so he can double check and make sure that you haven't made any errors. Because what I think your most important job is representing a buyer is protecting their earnest money. And if you make a mistake in drafting the contract and then they lose the earnest money because of a mistake you made in putting that contract together, that's a really, really tough lesson to learn. So having someone there to review it and say, yep, this all looks good, this is what your contract says, before you have anyone sign it, can avoid those mistakes. Because we're all happy to help fix a mistake to the extent that we can, and talk through that with you. But it's so much easier on you, so much better on your client, so much easier on me and Erin and Enrique to answer your question before you put anything in writing or before it gets signed, so that we can avoid the mistake altogether. So I'm always happy to answer any call you've got, especially beforehand, to make it a little bit easier to avoid those things. Again, happy to help fix to the extent possible, if something happens and then you need advice, but don't ever feel bad about calling saying, hey, what should I do here? Because we love those, because that means you're not going to make the mistake later on down the road that we have to fix. We can preempt that, and it's much better. So having him available to review those contracts, I think, would be invaluable.
I agree. And like Ashley said, Odalis, I'm here too. So you can always call us, even if I'm not the lender on your deal. If you've got a lender question, obviously we'd love to be the lender on your deals, but I know that that's not always, possible 100% of the time anyway. So just know that we're here as a partner, as support to you as you learn. So just feel free to stop in. Our offices are there. I know we're not today, but you'll see us. You'll see us. Are you going to be at a team meeting tomorrow?
Yes, most likely,
Okay,
yes.
perfect. We will meet you then. We'll give you the book and the things that we usually have there in person. Oh wait, this is Coffee Talk. You'll have to come to our new agent meet and greet too, but we'll give you all that info. But we'll set you up. Make sure you have our contact info. Make sure you know where we live when we're there, so you know where to go if you have questions.
Thank you. It's really helpful.
Absolutely.
You joined a great office. I think it's one of the most helpful offices, from like your partners being right there to other agents in the office. A lot of offices are super cutthroat, but this one is definitely uplifting, and they're big on R&D, which is rip off and duplicate. So what they want is for you to take strategies that have worked for them, that they've already cycled through some things. They're like, this works, and they're happy to share. Whereas other offices are like, no, I would never tell you how I send my mailers, because I don't want you to take my clients. That's not the personality of the office. So I think, especially as a new agent, having that support across the board is really, really important. and then all of the different learning opportunities that they've got for you from,
Yeah,
stuff
there's
like
a lot.
Coffee Talk, which we've got a light group here, I think, because it's President's Day. So I'm sure people are out enjoying time with their kids off school and whatnot. So normally we've got some more folks in there, and it's a little bit more answering questions that come up. So give it another try, but we have a lot of classes and stuff too. And I think as a new agent, when you've got a little bit more time to spend going to these classes, it's a really, really good use of that time. But definitely don't think that you got to learn everything before you jump in and start working, because you're never going to know everything. We all learn something every day. So another benefit of PC coaching is that you can go ahead and jump in with 2 feet, because you've got a whole team, including Enrique, backing you and can help you walk through the different steps. Makes a big difference.
Yeah.
And I'll second that.
Yep.
I'm always learning. And I, just to let you know, I'll be in the business 26 years next month. So
Wow.
what she means is every day there's something you can learn. And I didn't have this when I started, but this is the best office. So if you think about leaving, you come talk to me. First.
Well, did you think of any
Do you
questions while
have
we
any
were
other questions?
chatting away, Jan or Dallas?
No, I don't have any questions yet.
That's okay. It's a lot of info. A lot of info.
Yep.
Do you have anything, Jan, that you wanted to talk about? Anything weird?
No, I got some of my answers question my listing. I had multiple offers over the weekend and now they're all gone. We just
Oh no.
I know it's just one of those things, but I'm still getting showings, so hopefully we'll get another contract here. So, but I did have a question. I said, oh my gosh, I wish Ashley was here. But you know what? It made me dig and find out that where we thought we had an easement, it's really part of the survey now, the new survey. So no easement anymore.
Oh, so you just own that property now,
Yep,
or your seller
yep.
does?
Yes, yes. So it just I kept getting it mixed information, and I'm trying to get a listing across the street that's very similar. So it
Mhm.
kind of all worked in to work on it all together. But yeah, we figured it out. Everybody thought it was this, this, and this, and I just picked up the phone and called the surveyor because I know him
Oh yeah.
and found out. But it took some digging, but we found out. So now we're all on track again.
Well, hey,
Yes.
that's even easier in your world to just own the property instead of needing an easement.
Yeah, it used to be a street back at the turn of
Mhm.
the century. I think you and I've had this conversation. And then somehow there were all these easements. And so when they had it resurveyed back in September, they made it part of the survey.
Was this the one where like the city was supposed to have deeded the property and they didn't think they did, but I guess it sounds like maybe they did?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Well, that's good, because at least everyone thought the city had, or county, whatever, had deeded the property. So it's nice that that did end up being true.
Yes. So it makes it easier to explain. Yes, the next door neighbor or whoever doesn't own the driveway to maintain it, it belongs to you now.
Yeah. Yeah, that's always better. And oh, Dallas, in case you don't know what an easement is, what that is a legal recorded right to use someone else's land. So,
Yeah, they teach us that a lot in real estate school.
okay. Okay, well, I've never been through real estate school, so I don't even know what you guys learn.
That's
Law
the
school is
main
obviously a
thing.
little bit different. So, just wanted to point that out, because sometimes I find myself being a little bit guilty of talking about things and just assuming people know because we look at it every day. So I
Yeah,
apologize if I over explain, but I'm team rather you know twice than 0 times.
no, that's good, they teach us a lot of things that now I don't ever see. So at least they teach us that good.
That's true. I do hear that y'all have to calculate like acreage or square footage or something, and I'm pretty sure
Yeah.
nobody uses that ever.
Yeah.
But hey, I don't know how to do that, so you've got one up on me there. All right, well, you have anything else, Erin, that you wanted to add?
I don't. I mean, no, I think we're pretty good.
We're good?
I think we can
Alright.
wrap up 2 minutes early.
Wow. Alrighty. Well, thanks for coming, Jan. It was nice to meet you, Odalis, and I look forward to meeting you in real life, as I say. Again, just if you need anything, I'm here for you. And my office is right across the hall from here. So when you walk in the building, I'm on the right, whereas y'all are on the left.
Okay.
But pretty much all the office has my cell phone number. So if you need me after hours, I'm sure somebody will be happy to share. And when I meet you, I can pass that along to you as well, along with the rest of my contact info. But I'll be back in the office tomorrow.
Okay, thank you.
So will I, Dallas. If you need me before then, I know my business cards are at the very front of the office. So you can
Okay,
feel
I'll grab
free to grab one if you need to call me today for anything. Otherwise, I will meet you tomorrow too.
Okay, thank you.
PC, PC.
Thanks, guys. Have a good day.
Thank
Bye,
you.
guys.
Bye. Hello.
Taking this is still on from coffee talk.
Oh, okay, I didn't know.
So all this.
Yeah. Lack of body.
All good, I got you. No worries.
And then you're teaching Ignite, are you teaching Ignite today?
Yes, I have for the week.